So there we have it. There is no excuse for the British or American governments. Israel is being completely, openly, explicitly clear about their intentions. Their foreign minister, Eli Cohen, was today quoted as saying, at the end of this war, not only will Hamas no longer be in Gaza, but the territory of Gaza will also decrease. It is very clear what he means by that, which is that Israel intends to annex at least part of Gaza. To be clear, this is illegal, not slightly illegal, not a bit illegal, completely illegal. As it stands, Israel is already guilty of what is regarded by the United Nations as the illegal occupation of Gaza. That's because even though, for now, troops are not on its soil, it is under blockade from air, land and sea, and the control of water, food and basic supplies is controlled by Israel. It is also guilty of the direct illegal occupation and colonization of the West Bank. Now, to quote, for example, UN Security Council Resolution 2334, the Security Council reaffirmed this afternoon that Israel's establishment of settlements in Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, had no legal validity, constituting a flagrant violation under international law and a major obstacle to the vision of two states living side by side in peace and security within internationally recognized borders. Now, there are around 700,000 Israeli settlers who live illegally in the occupied West Bank in 279 settlements. That's grown from 520,000 since 2012. Now, according to the UN, there have been 3,372 violent incidents by settlers, injuring 1,222 Palestinians. Last year, settler violence reached the highest levels ever recorded, but Israel failed to investigate or prosecute that violence. Now, right now, largely unreported, given the horror currently being unleashed in Gaza, is that there's been a sharp uptick in violence killing Palestinians in the West Bank at the hands of Israeli forces and Israeli settlers. So important we talk about this, because the fact there is silence is allowing Israel to act with impunity in this occupied territory. Now, at least 64 Palestinians have been killed since the 7th of October. At the latest example, 2 Palestinian teenagers killed by Israeli forces near Ramallah. Now, before this episode, Amnesty International reported torture and ill treatment by Palestinians by Israeli forces, as well as incarceration without charge, including children. Now, Amnesty International documented the mass seizures of land and property in the West Bank, unlawful killings, forcible evictions, ethnic cleansing, arbitrary restrictions, and the denial of nationality. There are 175 checkpoints there and other roadblocks, a draconian permit scheme, and all of that, in the words of Amnesty, has the effect of controlling and fragmenting Palestinian communities. They close these checkpoints arbitrarily, throttling an already crippled Palestinian economy. Now, the West Bank has forgotten all of this. There are 2.7 million Palestinians living in the West Bank, compared to around 2.2 million in Gaza. But it is key to understand what has been a deliberate, long-lasting attempt to throttle and destroy the Palestinian right to national self-determination, which is at the core of all of this. We can't understand what's happening without talking about this. Now, in 2005, those settlements in Gaza were abandoned and soldiers removed from its soil, but that was part of an attempt, of a cynical attempt by the Israeli right to consolidate and expand the settlements of the West Bank, thereby denying the rights of the Palestinians to have their own nation. Now, the Israeli state is being so openly clear about their intentions, a land grab of the land of Gaza. Now, the other day on Sky News, Zippy Hotovely, who is the British ambassador to Israel, was on with an outrageous interview. But, I mean, she is on record as supporting the annexation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. She regards that as Judea and Samaria. It's all based on the Bible, a biblical justification for seizing the land of the Palestinian people, not just some random extremist made British ambassador. Because if you take, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu, in March, he addressed the UN Greater Assembly with a map of a greater Israel encompassing the West Bank and Gaza. Now, as the Palestinian Authority's representative to Germany, Laith Arafeh, posted on Twitter, no greater insult to every foundational principle of the UN than seeing Netanyahu display before the UN General Assembly a map of Israel that straddles the entire land from the river to the sea. And adding that with this map that Netanyahu negates Palestine and its people while attempting to spin the audience with rhetoric about peace in the region, all the while entrenching the longest ongoing belligerent occupation in today's world. The far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, also gave a speech with a Greater Israel map. And in that speech, he said there was no such thing as a Palestinian people. I mean, these are just extreme declarations, which are the official position of the Israeli state. Now, there are courageous, incredibly courageous Israeli fighters for a just peace who I'm constantly in awe of. And they're so courageous because, tragically, public opinion has become so hostile to Palestinians long before the current atrocity. A few years ago, a poll found that half the Israeli public wanted to expel Arab citizens from Israel itself, and they represent about a fifth of its population. We're not talking about the West Bank or Gaza here. Now, there's talk, which is being dressed up in humanitarian language, of allowing Gaza's population to flee to Egypt. Now, Egypt is run by an unpleasant dictatorship, Sisi, also backed by the West, who has committed himself terrible, grotesque human rights violations, including massacring protesters. They have pointed out publicly that Israel's leaders crave the permanent expulsion of Gaza's population to the Sinai, to Egypt, and that when they are forced to be removed, they will not return. And they're absolutely right. That's what history tells us. In 1948, the so-called Nakba, the foundation of Israel, when 700,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, you had the so-called Naksa, when between 280,000 and 325,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes. Several Palestinian villages razed to the ground. Now, the history of Palestinians is that when they are driven from their homes, when they're forced out, they do not come back. Now, Israel is openly talking about seizing Gaza's land. That's their foreign minister who has said that, and that's completely consistent with the official position throughout of the current incarnation of the Israeli state. Gaza, which is already tiny, no bigger than East London, one of the densest, most populated areas on earth, throughout they are being open. There is no excuses for pretending we do not know the war aims of the Israeli state. Their leaders and officials are saying things like, we will eliminate everything, that Gaza will be reduced to a city of tents. One of Israel's top military lawyers said, if you want to destroy Hamas, then you have to destroy Gaza, because everything in Gaza, almost every building there, is a stronghold of Hamas. Now, we've already seen the devastating civilian death toll from a few days of aerial bombardment. Think now of weeks and months of a ground invasion in a densely populated strip of land with the aim of annexation and colonization. We are talking here about an already pre-existing plan to destroy the very existence of a Palestinian nation, to make it completely impossible. I mean, in the West Bank, completely fragmented because of all those settlements and checkpoints, making life unbearable. Gaza under a siege now for 15 years. A blockade, a terrible blockade, and now a siege, which is just overtly against international law, with Israel talking overtly about taking their land. And, Joe Biden warning them against an occupation, all the rest of it. The US is clearly not putting any pressure, any meaningful pressure on Israel to not do that. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a land invasion of Gaza with catastrophic consequences, and then a potential purge, ethnic cleansing of the civilian population and the colonization of their land. Don't say you weren't warned. This is what's happening. Nobody in their right mind can say that these war crimes, which are being spoken about in public, are in any way have any basis or justification based on the terrible atrocities committed by Hamas on the 7th of October. Listen to what they're saying. Believe them. They mean it. Please like and subscribe. Do share this video to get the word out. You can keep the show on the road on patreon.com/OwenJones84. Listen to us on podcasts. I'll see you in a bit.